The stellar cartographer Zix-427 had mapped countless dead worlds across the galaxy's outer rim, but nothing in their 3 centuries of exploration had prepared them for what their sensors detected in the shadow of a collapsed star. The reading was faint, barely a whisper against the cosmic background radiation, but it was undeniably artificial. Anomaly detected, chimed the ship's eye. Unknown material composition. Organic components present. Zix's crystalline appendages rippled with curiosity as they adjusted their ship's course. Out here in the galactic periphery, any sign of technology was worth investigating. Most civilizations clustered around the galaxy's core, leaving the outer rim a wasteland of failed colonies and ancient ruins. The object came into view, and Zix's sensor arrays pulsed in surprise. Floating amid the stellar debris was a humanoid figure encased in what appeared to be a primitive pressure suit. The design was unlike anything in their extensive database of known species space technologies. Initiating recovery protocols, Zix announced to their empty ship. A tractor beam gently enveloped the figure, drawing it toward the cargo bay. As it came closer, Zix could make out more details through their high-resolution scanners. The suit was remarkably intact despite showing signs of extreme age. More intriguingly, it still maintained an internal atmosphere, but it was the readings from inside the suit that defied explanation. The organic material within displayed patterns that suggested both life and death simultaneously, a quantum state that should have been impossible to maintain. Once the figure was secured in the quarantine chamber, Zix approached for closer inspection. The suit's design was elegant in its simplicity, yet contained engineering principles that even their advanced civilization hadn't conceived of. Most notably, the material seemed to exist in a state of temporal flux, as if it were somehow anchored outside the normal flow of time. Species identification complete, the ship's AI announced. Subject appears to be human. Zix's crystalline form vibrated in shock. Humans were more legend than history, a species that had flared briefly but brilliantly across the galaxy before vanishing centuries ago. Their disappearance remained one of synorchaeology's greatest mysteries. Life signs? Zix queried. Inconclusive, the AI responded. Subject displays patterns consistent with both biological activity and complete cellular death. This should not be possible. Zix extended a sensory tendril toward the helmet's faceplate. The material was frosted over, but they could make out humanoid features within. Suddenly, the figure's hand twitched, a minute movement, but unmistakable. Warning, the AI intoned. Subject showing increased neural activity. The suit's systems began humming to life, ancient machinery awakening from centuries of dormancy. Zix backed away as status lights flickered across the suit's surface in patterns they didn't recognize. The helmet's faceplate began to clear, revealing the face within. The human's eyes snapped open, glowing with an inner light that spoke of technology far beyond what their species had been known to possess. Identity confirmed, the suit's systems announced in an ancient human language that Zix's universal translator struggled to parse. Commander Sarah Chen, Earth Defense Force. Emergency protocols activated. The human's eyes focused on Zix, displaying an awareness that should have been impossible after centuries of suspended animation. When she spoke, her voice was rough with age, but carried an undeniable strength. "How long?" she asked simply. By standard galactic measurements, approximately 342 years since the last confirmed human activity, Zix responded. The human, Commander Chen, closed her eyes briefly, processing this information. When she opened them again, they burned with renewed purpose. "Then there's still time," she said. "The others might have survived." Others? Zix's crystalline form pulsed with confusion. All historical records indicate humanity's complete disappearance. A smile crossed the commander's face, an expression that Zix's xenological databases categorized as suggesting either amusement or knowledge of something others didn't understand. "History," she said, "can be deceptive, especially when deception was the point." Before Zix could process this statement, their ship's sensors screamed a warning. 3 vessels had just emerged from hyperspace, their designs matching no known civilization's architecture. They were broadcasting on frequencies that hadn't been used since the human era. Commander Chen's smile widened. "Right on schedule," she whispered. Zix's simple mission of stellar cartography had just become infinitely more complicated. They had a feeling they were about to learn why humanity hadn't so much disappeared as carefully orchestrated the greatest vanishing act in galactic history. And judging by the approaching ships, the second act was about to begin. Zix's ship shuddered as the unknown vessels locked onto it with gravitational tethers. Commander Chen remained eerily calm, her suit's systems continuing their reactivation sequence with methodical precision. The approaching ships were massive, each easily dwarfing Zix's research vessel, with hulls that seemed to bend light around them in impossible ways. "Those are recovery vessels," Chen explained, her voice stronger now as her suit pumped regenerative compounds through her system. "Autonomous sentinels we left behind to monitor certain sectors." Left behind. Zix's crystalline form flickered with confusion. The historical records indicate humanity faced extinction from a catastrophic plague. Chen's laugh was harsh. "Is that what they wrote in the archives?" Convenient explanation. Simple, tragic, and completely fabricated. The ships drew closer, their massive forms now visible through the observation port. Their design was organic, almost alive, with sections that shifted and reconfigured themselves continuously. Zix had never seen anything like them in all their centuries of exploration. "The truth," Chen continued, "is far more complicated. Humanity didn't die out. We chose to disappear. The plague story was our cover." Before Zix could respond, their ship's computer chimed. "Warning. Unknown entities attempting systems access. Grant them full control," Chen commanded, her voice carrying an authority that made Zix's ship AI comply instantly, overriding its security protocols. The recovery vessels began transmitting data, massive streams of information that overwhelmed Zix's ship's processors. As the data flowed, holographic displays materialized throughout the chamber, showing images that defied understanding. 300 years ago, Chen explained as the images flickered around them, humanity made a discovery that changed everything. "We found something in the space between spaces, a fundamental truth about reality that no species was meant to know yet." The holograms showed massive structures hidden in dimensional pockets throughout the galaxy, human installations that had somehow remained undetected for centuries. Zix watched in amazement as the images revealed vast cities, fleets of ships, and billions of humans, all existing just slightly out of phase with normal spacetime. "The discovery terrified us," Chen continued. "We realized we weren't ready for it, that no species in the galaxy was ready. So we made a choice. Rather than risk this knowledge spreading before its time, we would remove ourselves from the equation entirely. An entire species just chose to step sideways out of reality." Zix's translator struggled to convey their incredulity. Chen's smile was tinged with sadness. "It wasn't an easy decision, but it was necessary. We developed the phase shift technology and began the greatest evacuation in history. Over the course of 5 years, we moved our entire civilization into dimensional sanctuary." The recovery vessels had nearly finished their data transfer. Through their ship's sensors, Zix could detect massive energy buildups as the ships prepared for some kind of transition. "But you stayed behind," Zix observed. "Why?" "Someone had to watch," Chen replied, "to monitor the galaxy's development and determine when the time was right for humanity's return. We left observers in temporal stasis at key points throughout space. I'm just one of many." Suddenly, the recovery vessels emitted pulses of energy that Zix's instruments couldn't even begin to measure. Space itself seemed to fold around them, creating a tunnel of distorted reality that connected their position to somewhere else. "That's our ride," Chen said, standing up despite her centuries of stasis. Her suit had finished its reactivation, And now Zix could see that what they had initially taken for simple survival equipment was actually an incredibly advanced piece of technology. The others will be awakening too, she continued. All across the galaxy, recovery vessels are retrieving observers like me. Something has changed, something big enough to trigger our recall protocols. What changed? Zix asked, their scientific curiosity overwhelming their trepidation. Chen's expression grew serious. That's what we need to find out. And quickly, because whatever it is, it was significant enough to initiate our return ahead of schedule. She turned to face Zix directly. The question is, are you coming with me? Zix's sensory appendages wavered with uncertainty. Everything they knew about the universe had just been upended. The greatest mystery in galactic history wasn't a tragedy. It was a deliberate choice made by a civilization far more advanced than anyone had imagined. The tunnel of distorted space pulsed, waiting. Through it, Zix could almost make out shapes, impossible geometries that their minds struggled to process. Beyond that tunnel lay answers to questions they hadn't even known to ask. The choice, Zix realized, had already been made the moment they had detected that faint signal in space. They were a scientist, an explorer, and the greatest discovery in history was inviting them through a door that no non-human had ever crossed. Yes, Zix answered. I'm coming. Chen nodded, satisfied. Then let's go meet the neighbors. The real ones. As their ship was drawn into the spatial distortion, Zix realized they were about to learn why humanity hadn't just hidden themselves away. They had ascended to a level of existence that the rest of the galaxy couldn't yet comprehend. And something had just forced them to consider making their presence known once again. Passing through the dimensional barrier felt like being turned inside out, while remaining perfectly still. Zix's crystalline form vibrated at frequencies they hadn't known were possible as their ship emerged into somewhere else. The space around them defied conventional physics. Massive structures floated in what appeared to be a perpetual sunset, their surfaces rippling with patterns that seemed to respond to thought itself. Fleets of ships moved in geometric formations that suggested they were traveling through more than 3 dimensions at once. Welcome to Installation Zero, Chen announced, her suit interfacing with the local systems, humanity's first and largest phase-shifted habitat. Zix's sensors struggled to process the environment. The installation appeared to be roughly the size of a small solar system, but it existed in a bubble of space that somehow contained its own laws of physics. Billions of humans went about their lives in cities that extended in impossible directions, their technology seamlessly integrated with the fabric of reality itself. This is beyond anything. Zix's translator failed to find words to complete the thought. It took us decades to build, even after we mastered phase-shift technology, Chen explained as their ship was guided toward a massive docking structure. But it gave us what we needed most, time. Time to develop, to understand, to prepare. Prepare for what? Before Chen could answer, a new presence made itself known. A vast consciousness that touched Zix's mind with the gentleness of a parent handling a newborn. For them, a voice echoed in both their minds. The space around their ship shimmered, and suddenly they were in a different chamber entirely. The room was both enormous and intimate, its walls showing views of multiple dimensions simultaneously. A figure stood before them, or rather, existed before them, as its form seemed to shift between different states of matter. Zix recognized it as human, but so far evolved beyond baseline humanity that the distinction barely mattered. Director Zhang, Chen said, saluting. The recall protocols activated ahead of schedule. Have they arrived already? The figure's form solidified slightly, resolving into an elderly Asian man in simple robes. Not yet, Commander. But our calculations show they'll reach the galaxy within the year. Much sooner than we anticipated. Who? Zix asked, their scientific curiosity overriding their awe. What species could be significant enough to make humanity hide itself away? Zhang smiled, and in that smile Zix saw eons of knowledge. Not a species, friend Zix, something far older. We call them the precursors, though that name is a vast oversimplification. Holographic displays materialized around them, showing what appeared to be tears in the fabric of space itself. Through these tears, Zix glimpsed shapes that their mind refused to process, vast geometries that suggested consciousness on a scale that made galaxies seem like atoms. When humanity first discovered phase shift technology, Zhang continued, we also found evidence of their previous visits to our galaxy. They are the original engineers of reality itself, and they return periodically to evaluate their work. Evaluate? Zix asked, dreading the answer. They test species that achieve certain technological thresholds, Chen explained. Those that pass are elevated to a new level of existence. Those that fail, she trailed off meaningfully, are removed from the equation, Zhang finished. Their entire civilizations erased so thoroughly that they never existed in the first place. We found evidence of hundreds of species that had reached our level of development, only to disappear completely when the precursors arrived. Zix's form pulsed with horror at the implications, and humanity hid itself to avoid this test. No, Chen said firmly. We hid to prepare for it, to give ourselves time to develop the capabilities we'd need not just to pass their test, but to challenge their right to administer it at all. Zhang nodded. We discovered something in our research, inconsistencies in the precursors' patterns. We began to suspect that these tests weren't about elevation at all, but about control. About maintaining their position as the supreme arbiters of galactic evolution. The recovery vessels didn't recall me because the precursors were coming, Chen realized aloud. They recalled me because we're finally ready to face them. Indeed, Zhang confirmed. In the centuries since our disappearance, we've developed technologies and understandings that even the precursors haven't imagined. We've evolved our consciousness beyond the limits they set for sapient species. And now we're going to give them a test of their own. Chen finished, her expression fierce. Zix absorbed this information, their scientists' mind racing. But why reveal this to me? I'm just a stellar cartographer. Zhang's form shifted again, suggesting barely contained power. Because you represent exactly what we've been fighting to protect. The right of species to develop on their own terms, to explore and learn without the threat of extinction hanging over them. We want you to bear witness to what comes next. Suddenly, alarms began blaring throughout the installation. Zhang's form tensed, his appearance becoming more solid as he focused on something beyond normal space. They're here, he announced. 3 centuries ahead of schedule. They must have detected our preparations despite our precautions. Through the dimensional windows, Zix watched as space itself began to tear open. Through the rents in reality, those impossible geometries began to pour into normal space-time. The precursors had arrived early, perhaps hoping to catch humanity unprepared. But as Zix looked around at the calm determination on the faces of Chen and Zhang, at the massive fleets of reality-bending ships moving into position, at the billions of evolved humans preparing to face down the architects of existence itself, they realized something profound. The precursors weren't early. They were too late. Reality shuddered as the precursors emerged fully into normal space. Their forms were impossibly vast. Geometric patterns that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, each movement sending ripples through the fabric of space-time. To Zix's perception, they appeared as crystalline mountains that somehow folded in on themselves, their surfaces reflecting universes that had never existed. Beautiful, aren't they? Chen murmured, her suit's systems adapting to the dimensional distortions. In all our years of preparation, we never lost our awe of them. Installation 0 hummed with energy as humanity's defense systems activated. The massive structure began to shift, its seemingly decorative patterns revealing themselves as incredibly complex machines that operated on principles Zix couldn't begin to comprehend. The precursors' first communication came not in words, but in pure concepts, transmitted directly into the minds of every being in the installation. Aberration. Examination. Correction. Zhang stepped forward, his form now fully solidified. When he responded, his voice carried the weight of centuries of preparation. "We reject your authority to examine or correct. We are not your experiments." The space around them twisted as the precursors processed this defiance. Irrelevant. Compliancy is not requested. Evaluation proceeds. Massive tendrils of crystalline energy began to extend from the precursor forms, reaching toward Installation Zero. They moved with the inexorable confidence of beings who had never known meaningful resistance. "Now," John commanded quietly. Humanity's response was immediate and devastating. The seemingly decorative patterns throughout Installation Zero pulsed with energy, and suddenly the laws of physics themselves seemed to rewrite in their local space. The precursors' energy tendrils met barriers that shouldn't have been possible, shields made of altered reality itself. Impossible, the precursors projected, their surprise evident in the way space rippled around them. "This level of development is not permitted." "That was your first mistake," Chen said, her suit linking with Installation Zero's systems, "believing you had the right to permit or deny any species development." Zix watched in awe as humanity revealed the full extent of their preparations. Ships emerged from dimensional pockets throughout the region, each one utilizing technology that operated on principles the precursors themselves had never imagined. While the ancient beings had mastered the existing laws of physics, humanity had learned to write new ones. "We spent centuries studying you," Zhang explained, his voice calm even as space battle erupted around them. "We learned that for all your power, you think in patterns, predictable patterns. You never considered that a species might develop along lines you hadn't anticipated." The precursors' response was to intensify their attack, bringing to bear weapons that had erased countless civilizations from existence. But where these weapons struck, they found humanity's defenses waiting, specifically designed to counter each attack. "Genetics as altered. Consciousness expanded. Reality modified." The precursors' thoughts held something Zix never expected to detect from such beings: uncertainty. "This is not a or dying to design. That's humanity's greatest strength," Chen said, coordinating with the defense fleets through her suit's interfaces. "We don't follow designs. We create our own path." The battle that followed defied description in any conventional sense. The precursors wielded the fundamental forces of reality as weapons, while humanity responded with technologies that simply rewrote those forces in localized spaces. Where the precursors tried to unmake matter, they found humans had created new forms of existence. Where they attempted to alter time, humanity had developed shields that existed outside of temporal flow. Zix's scientific mind struggled to process what they were witnessing. This wasn't just a battle between species, it was a clash between different philosophies of existence itself. The precursors represented absolute order, the rigid application of universal laws. Humanity had become champions of creative chaos, of evolution and change. "We're not fighting to destroy them," Zhang explained, noticing Zix's confusion. "We're fighting to prove a point." Indeed, Zix noticed that humanity's tactics weren't aimed at damaging the precursors, but at containing them, at demonstrating again and again that their assumed superiority was no longer absolute. Analysis complete, the precursors suddenly projected, their forms pulling back slightly. "Species designation, humanity. Evaluation, unprecedented." "No," John corrected. "Evaluation. Unnecessary. We are not yours to evaluate." For the first time in perhaps billions of years, the precursors found themselves facing an outcome their vast intelligence hadn't predicted. A species had not only survived their test, but had fundamentally rejected the premise of their authority. The battle paused as the implications rippled through reality itself. In that moment, Zix realized they were witnessing more than just humanity's triumph. They were seeing the beginning of a fundamental change in the order of the galaxy. In the silence following the battle, Reality itself seemed to hold its breath. The precursors' crystalline forms had withdrawn to a defensive formation, their previous certainty shattered by humanity's demonstration of power. Installation Zero hung in space, like a monument to possibility, its defensive systems still humming with energies that defied conventional physics. Alternatives must be coincided, the precursors projected, their thought patterns showing signs of adaptation. Your species PRDSENTs, and ANOMNLI. No, Zhang replied, his form radiating calm authority. We present a choice. The same choice we made centuries ago, to forge our own path rather than follow predetermined patterns. Chen stepped forward, her suit's systems still linked with Installation Zero's defenses. You've spent billions of years testing species, eliminating those that didn't fit your vision of proper development. But you never asked why they failed. You never considered that your tests might be flawed. Zix watched in fascination as the precursors' forms shifted, suggesting internal conflict. Their vast consciousness grappled with concepts that challenged the very foundation of their existence. Explain, they demanded. Every species you've tested, Zhang continued, was forced to develop along paths you determined were correct. But true advancement, true evolution, requires the freedom to explore all possibilities, even those that seem wrong or dangerous. Images appeared in the space between them, holographic representations of countless civilizations that had fallen to the precursors' tests. But now they were shown differently, each one highlighted for its unique potential, its untapped possibilities. Humanity didn't hide from your test, Chen added. We hid to prove that there were other ways to develop, paths you hadn't imagined. And we're not the only ones with that potential. Dangerous, the precursors projected. Chaos. Unpredictable. Autisumes. Yes, Zhang agreed. But that's exactly what makes it valuable. Evolution isn't about reaching a predetermined endpoint. It's about discovering new possibilities. Zix felt their crystalline form resonating with this truth. Their own species had developed along the careful lines the precursors had deemed acceptable, never knowing they were living within imposed limitations. We offer you a new role, Zhang continued, not as testers and executioners, but as guardians and observers. Help protect developing species from external threats, but allow them to chart their own course. The precursors' forms twisted in complex patterns as they processed this proposal. Observation. Humanity has not 18 and PT destruction, despite demonstrated capability. Because this isn't about destruction or dominance, Chen explained. It's about growth, about the right of all species to find their own way. After what seemed like an eternity, the precursors' forms stabilized into a new configuration. Proposal. Acceptable. Parameters require adjustment. Cooperation possible. The tension in Installation Zero eased slightly, though humanity's defenses remained ready. This wasn't just a victory. It was the beginning of a fundamental change in the galaxy's order. And now, Zhang said, turning to Zix, comes perhaps the most important part. What do you mean? Zix asked. You're going to be our witness, Chen explained. Return to known space. Tell them what you've seen. Let every species know that the boundaries they thought were fixed are actually fluid, that their potential is limited only by their imagination and courage. Zix's form pulsed with the weight of this responsibility. They won't believe me. Some will, Zhang said softly. The ones who are ready to see beyond their limitations. And that's enough to start with. As if to punctuate his words, Installation Zero began to shift, parts of it phasing back into normal spacetime. All across the galaxy, other hidden human installations were doing the same, revealing themselves gradually to minimize the shock to existing civilizations. The precursors, too, were changing. Their forms were already beginning to adapt to their new role, shifting from instruments of judgment to beacons of possibility. They would remain in the galaxy, but as observers and occasional advisors rather than supreme arbiters. "It's time for us to step back into the light," Chen said, her suit powering down for the first time since her awakening. Not as returning conquerors or advanced overlords, but as fellow travelers on the road of evolution. Zix watched as humanity began the careful process of reintegrating with the galaxy they had left centuries ago. They had hidden themselves away not in fear, but with purpose. And in doing so, they had changed not just themselves, but the fundamental rules that governed galactic civilization. "What happens now?" Zix asked. Zong smiled, his form beginning to shift between states again. Now the real adventure begins. The galaxy is no longer bound by artificial constraints. Every species is free to explore its full potential. There will be challenges, certainly. Dangers, absolutely. But also possibilities beyond anything we can imagine. As Zix prepared to return to known space with their incredible story, they reflected on how much had changed since they'd first detected that faint signal in the void. They had sought to map dead worlds, but had instead witnessed the rebirth of possibility itself. The age of predetermined paths was over. The age of true exploration was about to begin.